हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आज हम करेंगे MEG 1 ब्लॉक 6 यूनिट 29 और विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ के बारे में पढ़ेंगे, उनकी लाइफ और उनके लाइफ व्यू के बारे में पढ़ेंगे। तो विलियम वर्ड्सवर्थ was born on April 7, 1770 at Cockermouth, and his sister Dorothy, with whom he had close friendly relationship throughout his poetic career, was born on September 25th next year at the same place. William lost his mother in 1778 and his father in 1783. The spirit of classism was waning in English literature during these final decades of the century, and in Germany, Goethe's Werther, who was a landmark in the Romantic literature of Europe, was published in 1774. And Rousseau's Confession, which had no less of influence on the Romantic poet of England, saw the light of the day in 1781. And a very important event, the American Declaration of Independence, took place in 1776. वर्ड्सवर्थ फर्स्ट पब्लिश्ड पोएम सोनेट, जिसका नाम था ऑन सीइंग मिस हेलन मारिया विलियम्स वीप एट अ टेल ऑफ डिस्ट्रेस, appeared in the European magazine in March 1787. An evening walk was written the next year. The French Revolution started with the storming of Bastille, Bastille, 1789. In 1790, Wordsworth had a walking tour to France. He came back to England in early 1791 and returned to France late in the year to see revolutionary fervor in Paris. He had a love affair with Annette Vallon, and their daughter Caroline was born in December 1792. He composed descriptive sketches in 1793 and returned to England to seek a livelihood. Godwin's Political Justice was published the same year, and the spirit of inquiry and quest took an artistic shape in 1794 in the publication of Blake's Songs of Experience. In 1795, Wordsworth and Coleridge came close to each other, which finally resulted in the joint authorship of the Lyrical Ballads, 1798. This very year, Wordsworth wrote some autobiographical verse, which was the foundation of the Prelude. This last decade of 18th century saw a reign of terror in France with the rise of Napoleon. In 1802, Wordsworth wrote much lyrical poetry and published a new edition of Lyrical Ballads with revised preface. In 1804, Ode to Duty was composed, and Ode on Intimations of Immortality was completed. In 1807, Wordsworth published poems in 2 volumes, and it was ridiculed in reviews. The next year, he left Dove Cottage for a larger house in Craspmere, and then in 1813 moved to Riddell Mount, home for the rest of his life. The Excursion was published in 1814, prefaced by an account of the plan for the recluse. The argument and the classification advanced by Wordsworth in the preface to the collected edition of poems spurred means inspired, okay, Coleridge to complete his own theoretical statement, Biographia Literaria, which was later published in 1817. In 1843, Wordsworth became poet laureate on Robert Southey's death. By now, Wordsworth was a widely celebrated figure, and there was steady increase in his अमेरिकन रेपुटेशन. ये ना नेट में आते हैं ये क्वेश्चन, जैसे रॉबर्ट साउदे की डेथ के बाद कौन पोएट लॉरिएट बने थे. ठीक है. ही डाइड इन अप्रैल 1850 एंड द प्रिल्यूड विच ही रोट एंड री रोट ऑलमोस्ट थ्रू आउट हिज लाइफ वॉज पब्लिश्ड आफ्टर हिज डेथ. Throughout his life, he wrote poems of philosophical issues, metaphysical problems, man nature relationship and saw great writers at work, जैसे कि गोथ, कॉलरिज, जेन ऑस्टिन, कीट्स, शेले, बैरन, बेल्जैक, डिकन्स, चार्ल्स डिकन्स की बात हो रही है, कैरलिल, टेनिसन, रस्किन ब्राउनिंग, थैकरे, एर्नोल्ड, etc. His own best poetry, as pointed out by Matthew Arnold, came of course between, ये तो पहले भी बताया, 1797 to 1807, the most fruitful 10 years of his long poetic career. In the remaining years, good writing came occasionally, and Wordsworth felt with pain this waning of poetic power in him and presented it in the Immortality Ode. मतलब क्योंकि वो मतलब उनको बहुत दुख होता था जब वो पोएटिक पावर उनकी जा रही थी ना, उनमें उनको खुद को लगता था कि कम हो रही है, तो उनको बहुत पेन होता था. द ड्रामा ऑफ अ क्राइसिस इज़ वेरी impressively presented in that poem through the philosophy given by Wordsworth to explain the crisis in wide open to debate controversy. The question of the order in which Wordsworth's poems are to be arranged and studied is to be debated. He himself rejected the chronological arrangement in favor of what he called the psychological classification, poems of the affections, the fancy, the imagination, sentiment, and reflection. Others have proposed classification by form and theme, but actually this question is a subsidiary in Wordsworth. His best things are scattered up and down his poetry in whatever order it is arranged. As a sonneteer, Wordsworth's merits are simply remarkable. The best sonnets of Wordsworth are worthy of Shakespeare and Milton, and perfect, unsurpassable, perfect. There can be no doubt that Wordsworth found the discipline of sonnet writing helpful and beneficial. Indeed, he says so himself in Nuns Fret Not. Now, so far as form is concerned, apart from his sonnets, he excels in lyric poetry. As lyrics, the Lucy poems are matchless, impassioned, disciplined, concentrated on content, informal, dramatic. The essential Wordsworthian theme lies in every fiber of these lyrics, and yet the palpable design of his longer works are not to be found in them. Wordsworth had the ambition of writing a great poem, very long, very rich, containing all his thoughts and the history of the maturing of his poetic sensibility, an epic simultaneously personal, national, and universal. But he could never write this poem. Attempts remained unfinished. The prelude was designed to be the prelude to that poem. Throughout his life, he kept in revising the prelude, but could not publish it. When it was published posthumously after his death, the critics did not hesitate to call it a great poem. Wordsworth's greatest and having wonderful coverage, depth, and variety. Much of its content is to be found in the Tintern Abbey poem. In his youth, Wordsworth was inspired by the idea of Voltaire and Rousseau that led to the revolutionary movement in France. He welcomed the new democratic ideas because they tuned well with his reaction against the urban insularity, means attitude, of the 18th century English literature. Even when he was disillusioned with the French Revolution and began to hate its developments, his first concern was the poor, the rural, the lowly. His rich humanism made him very sympathetic to the suffering humanity in any age. When industrialization and commercialism made the difference between the rich and the poor wider, uglier, and more acute, he heard the still and the music of humanity and was sad to see what man has made of man. He felt that the world is too much with us and realized that as a poet he had some responsibility. He wanted to show man the right path, and this made much of his poetry didactic. The moral concern, therefore, is very prominent in his poetry. This caused uh, this caused air in Keats, but did not deprive him of popular appreciation. Apart from deep emotional concern for humanity, there is another very important theme in his poetry. It is his approach to an understanding of nature. Nature never did betray the hurt, but loved her, he said. If one goes to nature with an open heart, nature gives one everything, especially strength to face and overcome all sorrows and sufferings of life. In the words of W.H. Hudson, as an interpreter of nature, he means Wordsworth, still holds the first place unchallenged. His love of nature was boundless, and his knowledge of nature was equal to his love. With a keen eye, he saw everything in nature. The minutest details did not escape his attention, and he believed that all these natural objects are just manifestations of the spirit of nature. Through these objects, one reaches the center, the essence, come in contact with an infinite source of life and beauty, and gets all food and nourishment one requires in life. When one is in true contact with nature, nature becomes a garden of one's soul. He friend, the friend, a philosopher and guide. From time to time, Wordsworth lost this holy contact with nature and lamented the loss, but never was his belief in nature's benign power shaken. Since he knew the panacea, since he knew the cure and found illness all around him, saw people ignoring what could cure them. He was sad. He was sad. The tragic awareness of the suffering of man made him more inclined towards mankind, and so his love for nature and love for humanity became parts of the same awareness and philosophical truth he adhered to. Even his poetic diction, that poetry should be written in the natural, unaffected language that the common man uses in his normal speech or communication, is derived from his concern for humanity at large, from his respect for the uneducated rural people who have a rich heart, sincere feeling, and direct contact with nature, and do not lay waste their powers in getting and spending. Thus, his thought and art are essentially the outcome of the impact that the new vision leading to French Revolution created upon his mind. It is a turn from capitalism to socialism, but socialism of a very special kind, in which the first criteria is the recognition of merit to be found abundantly in the poor and hardly in the rich. यहाँ हमारा फिनिश हो जाता है ये पार्ट. नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू डू द प्रिल्यूड हम नेक्स्ट वीडियो में करेंगे. थैंक यू सो मच. प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब माई चैनल.